And as far as Nehru was concerned, the Kashmir was, it was very personal for him, and its accession was also very, very important for him. Recent writers, recent historians have shown how, Nehru's writings, both in a personal capacity and in his official correspondence, he has over and again emphasized on his love for Kashmir.
Addressing a rally in Gujarat on October 11, Prime Minister Narendra Modi made a veiled attack on Jawaharlal Nehru over the Kashmir crisis. Similarly, in September, Union Home Minister Amit Shah, while addressing a rally at Goregaon, accused Nehru of allowing Pakistan to occupy parts of Kashmir. India's current Finance Minister, Nirmala Sitharaman, has also attacked Nehru for internationalizing the Kashmir issue by taking it to the United Nations. Jawaharlal Nehru, India's first Prime Minister, has been repeatedly blamed by the Bharatiya Janata Party politicians for the Kashmir crisis. So, what was Jawaharlal Nehru's role in the accession of Kashmir to India?
Let me give a little bit of a background on what Kashmir was like in terms of the other princely states. So basically, when the British decided to leave India, there were these 500 odd princely states, and their fate was hanging in the air because they were not exactly part under the British. They had treaties with the British, but not exactly under their rule. And they had to choose where they wanted to go, where they wanted to be after independence, whether they wanted to be a part of India, uh, join Pakistan, or have an independent status. But they had to make that choice, and that was a very crucial aspect of the political undertakings that were happening during independence. Now, among these 500 princely states, uh, Jammu and Kashmir was the most important because it was not only the largest, but it also shared borders with both India and Pakistan. It was also it had a unique demographic because this was a state which had a majority Muslim population, but was ruled by a Hindu ruler. So, in many ways, Kashmir had posed a very complicated problem at this point. When this entire question of where the 500 princely states would go was, had arisen, the Indian National Congress had already, by the late 1930s, it had made its stance very clear that it would be trying to convince the princely states to become part of India. And for that purpose, a committee for the states had been formed with Vallabhbhai Patel as its leader, and Mr. VP Menon, he would be working with Mr. Patel, and they would be working under the guidance of Mountbatten, and they played a very crucial role in convincing the princely states to become part of India. They would be going around strategizing, convincing, cajoling the states to be part of India. Uh, this is something to keep in mind because when it comes to Kashmir, it was not Patel that was involved as much as Nehru. Kashmir during independence was being ruled by Maharaja Hari Singh, who was a Dogra ruler, and he came to throne in 1925. At this point, right before the accession, the Maharaja ruling Kashmir was Maharaja Hari Singh. He was a Dogra ruler who came to throne in 1925, and like several other Maharajas, not all of the other princely states, he was also more involved in hunting and basically leisurely activities rather than in the politics going on in his empire in the state at that time. It was during his rule that somebody called Sheikh Abdullah, he emerged in the political scene. And Sheikh Abdullah and Nehru's friendship, it will go on to play a very crucial role in the whole Kashmir conflict. So, who was Sheikh Abdullah? He was he was a son of a shawl merchant. He graduated from Aligarh Muslim University with a degree in science, and clearly he was from a fairly middle class background. However, he was unable to find a government job in Kashmir, which led him to question the whole treatment of Muslims in the state administration. I mean, he believed that the reason why a lot of Muslims, despite being in the majority, do not get government jobs is because there is religious prejudice against them. It was also during this time, when he was questioning the whole, the way Muslims are treated in in Kashmir, and how, and he was also mobilizing a lot of Muslims. He formed something called the All Jammu Kashmir Muslim Conference that later became the National Conference. And when he was doing all this in the 1930s, he came into contact with Jawaharlal Nehru, and once they came into contact with each other, they immediately formed this, they struck a friendship. And what historians write is that the reason why they shared a lot of warmth with each other was because there was a shared ideological commitment towards Hindu Muslim harmony and socialism. These were typically values that we associate with Nehru even today. So these were things that that brought them together. And immediately, they both struck a friendship. Interestingly, when Sheikh Abdullah was he also launched this Quit Kashmir movement in Jammu and Kashmir against the ruler, against Maharaja Hari Singh. He basically wanted Hari Singh to resign, and that he wanted a representative government through universal suffrage. So he basically, Nehru was also supportive of Sheikh Abdullah's Quit Kashmir movement. And because of Sheikh Abdullah's Quit Kashmir movement, he was fairly disliked by the Maharaja. And he was sent behind the bars on number of occasions. In 1946, for instance, he was sentenced to 3 years in jail. And during this time, Nehru, he sort of rushed to his friend's rescue. And but then, Hari Singh's he prevented Nehru from entering the state, and he was sent back to India, or to British India. So when the whole question of Kashmir's accession to India arose, the Maharaja, he made it very clear that he intended to remain independent. He wouldn't join either India or Pakistan. The reason being that he absolutely disliked the Congress and Nehru, because he thought that he was uh, basically supporting the Quit Kashmir movement of Sheikh Abdullah. He was so close to Sheikh Abdullah, so he did not have any liking towards Nehru. But at the same time, Hari Singh was also cautious about joining Pakistan, because that would mean that the fate of the Hindu dynasty that might be sealed. So for him, the decision was quite clear. He wanted to remain independent. And as far as Nehru was concerned, the Kashmir was, it was very personal for him, and its accession was also very, very important for him. Recent writers, recent historians have shown how Nehru's writings, both in his personal capacity and in his official correspondence, he has over and again emphasized on his love for Kashmir, on how he's written to his daughter, he's written to Sheikh Abdullah about how much Kashmir meant to him, and why the accession of Kashmir was it was a personal matter for him. So he was also very much involved in this entire matter. But right before independence, it was actually Mountbatten who, in a sense, tried to convince the Maharaja to accede to India. And he was an old acquaintance of the Maharaja, so he also thought that perhaps he would be able to convince him. He did not want Nehru or Gandhi to go to Kashmir at this point at all. And then it was him who went there, and he thought that he would be able to convince the king. Uh, First, he met the prime minister of the Maharaja, and he again made it very clear that they would remain independent. He then tried to fix a personal appointment with the Maharaja, and on the day of the appointment, Hari Singh, he sort of stayed in bed. He said that he has an attack of colic, and he decided to not meet Mountbatten. Much later, Karan Singh, who's Hari Singh's son, he in his autobiography, he has written that this was literally the last chance of working out a viable political settlement on Kashmir, and which his father sort of missed out on, because he wanted to avoid an uncomfortable conversation with Mountbatten, perhaps. So he just stayed in bed. Then, when on August 15th, independence was announced, Kashmir had clearly not acceded even then, but it had decided that it would, sign standstill agreements with both India and Pakistan, so that goods and people and any kind of supplies can move between these countries. Uh, you know, but at the same time, Pakistan was also hopeful that Kashmir would accede to them because of the demographics, because uh, it had a majority Muslim population, and it was hopeful that it would accede to them. Uh, but then clearly, since that was also not happening, um, and we also need to remember that at this point, when this entire issue of accession was still not clear, Nehru, while he wanted Kashmir to become part of India, Patel was, as far as Sardar Patel, who was dealing with most of the other states, was concerned, he had made it clear that it's okay if Kashmir goes to Pakistan, because he was cognizant of the demographics of the situation. But then he too changed his mind, because on 13th of September, the government of Pakistan, they decided that they would be okay with having Junagadh accede to them. And that was not acceptable to India, because Junagadh is a Hindu majority state with a Muslim ruler, which is the opposite case of what was happening in Kashmir. So once Pakistan announced this, Patel made it very clear that, in that case, even Kashmir would, the question of Kashmir's accession is also remains would also not be decided unless there's any clear acceptance of where they want to go. uh, and by now, Nehru was also aware that, the situation in Kashmir was becoming more and more dangerous, and there were rumors of Pakistan preparing to send infiltrators, and he does write to Patel about this. He also mentions that, it is very important right now to release Sheikh Abdullah, because once the Abdullah is released, he would be able to garner popular support for the Maharaja. That is very necessary. And of course, he had a personal vested interest in this as well, because Sheikh, he really was very fond of Sheikh Abdullah, and he thought that, once you have Abdullah out of the jail, there would be popular support for the Maharaja, and that would help him overcome the infiltration from Pakistan if it does happen. Uh, Once Abdullah is released from the jail, he announces very clearly that he reiterates his demand that there needs to be a popular government in Kashmir, which would consist of both Hindus, Sikhs, and Muslims. But the Maharaja, he still is, very clear that he will remain an independent government. His ambitions for independence was very clear even at that point. And he makes this announcement that the only thing that can change his mind is that if either of the sides, either India or Pakistan, they decide to use force against us. Now, the moment he says this, 2 weeks later, there were these several thousand of armed men who crossed the border into Kashmir, and they made their way to Srinagar, the capital. The fact that these were Pathans from Pakistan, that is undisputed. But why they came and on whose orders they came, that has remained a question, and it is literally it has remained at the heart of the dispute of Kashmir till date. Because for the Indian government, the Indian side believes that these were Pakistani infiltrators who were sponsored by the state. Pakistan, on the other hand, has clearly, denied any kind of involvement in the matter, and they claim that these were Pathans who had sort of rushed to the aid of the Muslims in Kashmir, who they said were being persecuted by a Hindu administration. This incident of the Pakistani infiltrators happens, that is when Hari Singh, who is completely confused, and he basically informs the Indian government for military assistance. And that is when VP Menon, who's also part of the state's committee, he flies down to Hari Singh, and he advises him to immediately move to Jammu, because he'll be safer there. He Once again, there's a meeting of the defense committee that takes place in Delhi, and they decide that, it's in a situation like this, India would like to help Kashmir militarily, but in that case, Kashmir will have to sign the instrument of accession. That's when, VP Menon, he flies down to Jammu once again. That is where the Maharaja is in hiding now. He flew out of Kashmir as soon as he could, and then he was in hiding in Jammu, and he immediately signs the instrument of accession because he needed military help from India at that time. That is how Kashmir accedes to India. Instrument of accession is signed. That is when the Indian government immediately, it decides to send its troops to Kashmir, and in the next couple of days, a couple of weeks, the Indian army is able to clear out Kashmir of the infiltrators from Pakistan. And now, soon after, again the focus had shifted to what the internal politics of Kashmir. At this point, Nehru, he also writes to Maharaja Hari Singh that he would like Sheikh Abdullah to become the prime minister. He would, and with the support of Gandhi, he is able to do that. He manages to make Abdullah as the head of an emergency administration at that, in Kashmir. And now, but the problem is that, for Pakistan, this entire situation of the Indian government helping Kashmir, that is absolutely unacceptable. And there's immediately an impasse with India, between India and Pakistan at this point, because Pakistan believes that the accession is not justified, and India believes that the violence was started by Pakistan. So it was a justifiable way in which Kashmir had exceeded. So there is constant conversation going on about how should this matter be resolved. And Nehru then suggests that they let there be a plebiscite and let the people decide, or people of Kashmir decide where they want to join. And Mr. Ramchandra Guha, in his book, he also mentions that Nehru is in fact open to an independent Kashmir as well. He by now, because he sees that the situation has really deteriorated and things are not improving with Pakistan, and he is open to Kashmir being independent or being divided, with Jammu coming to India and the valley going to Pakistan, or the area beyond Poonch going to Pakistan, and the rest coming to India. But again, there's no decision being taken at all, and that is when on 1st of January 1948, India decided to take the Kashmir issue up in the United Nations, and this was on the advice of Mountbatten, who was then the Governor General of India. But at the once the issue goes up to the United Nations, that is when India is really surprised and shocked to see that there's a lot of support that the British is providing to the Pakistan position. And Nehru clearly is extremely disturbed, and he really regrets taking up the matter to the international stage, because he never thought that there would be so much of support for the Pakistan position at this point. Uh, and then, of course, we have, the United Nations. It then sends a committee to look into the matter in Kashmir. Meanwhile, what is happening in Kashmir is that there's still an armed struggle going on between India and Pakistan in certain parts of Kashmir. And as far as the internal politics is concerned, Sheikh Abdullah has clearly become the most important political figure by now. Hari Singh is he is still the king, but he's literally the ceremonial head. He's nowhere to be seen. All decisions are being taken by Sheikh Abdullah. He makes these land reforms, and a lot of other reforms are being made by him. And he is also very clearly emphatic. He's emphasizing a lot on the ties that Kashmir shares with India. So for instance, in May 1948, he organizes these week-long celebration of freedom in Srinagar, in which he invites a lot of political figures from India. And sometime in the autumn of 1948, that is when Nehru finally comes to Kashmir. And there's a lot of celebration and excitement around Nehru's visit to Kashmir. You have newspaper reports telling us about how, when Sheikh Abdullah and Nehru, they take this 2-hour ride down the Jhelum River. You have hundreds of people, thousands of people gathering around them to take a look at them, and they shower flowers on Nehru. So there's clearly a lot of excitement. And during this visit, that is when Nehru, he unfurls the national flag at Lal Chowk. It's a very significant moment.